Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Developing the Leader Within podcast. I'm Enrique, your host, and today I'm extremely blessed to have with me Dr. Maya Rockeymoore Cummings. She is the founder, president, and CEO of Global Policy Solutions, as well as the wife of the late Representative Elijah Cummings. Dr. Cummings, thank you so much for being with me today. I am truly blessed to have you on the show.
It is my honor and privilege to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, we're going to be discussing a topic that I think is so important to leadership. And it is leadership and global policy and strategy is right down your alleyway of what you do and what you're involved in. But before we get into that topic, could you take just a brief moment and share with us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so thank you so much. I am the fourth generation from slavery in this country. My parents grew up in the Jim Crow South. My folks are from the Louisiana, Texas area. I grew up with my parents telling me what it was like to grow up in the Jim Crow South, even though I did not. I was born in the post-civil rights generation, 1971, and my dad was recruited to go into the U.S. Air Force. So we lived in many places around the country and even abroad. And yet I always saw the juxtaposition of the haves and have-nots in our society as, race and class and gender, and was curious about it. And so much so that I became a political science major and took it all the way through to earning a PhD in political science with an emphasis in American politics, international relations, African-American studies, and public policy. And so I bring all of that background to the Washington area in 1997, when I get here in the fall of 1997. And I end up working on Capitol Hill for the House Ways and Means Committee for former Congressman Charlie Rangel, before going into the nonprofit think tank world and then creating my own firm in 2005 called Global Policy Solutions.
Yeah, that's an illustrious career. I've followed it on all the available data that is available to us on the internet. So amazed at what you've been able to do, in your life. And I shared a little bit about that prior to the show. My daughter is a political science major, and I know she'll be listening because I think you're just such a great example of what you can do from that point forward. And so I thank you for that example. You're impacting my daughter, right? This topic about leadership, which is, near and dear to my heart, but a role that you are in and have been in, leading the Democratic Party there in Maryland, doing so many things at the forefront. A congressman, you went for that. You went for the governorship. You've done so much, which just makes me proud to see a female minority in our nation achieving so much. It really is an example. But in terms of leadership, I have found that there is such a shortfall in the foresight of leaders when it comes to the topic of global policy and strategy. And our nation at this point, the small businesses are suffering because of the pandemic, because of I'm going to say it. Sometimes lack of action from higher authorities to be able to help at that level. But the businesses at that level and the leadership at that level have a way of affecting global policies here at the nation through a strategic posture of support, right? And usually we do that at the polls, right? If we don't get the proper, sustainment and help, that's really where we can affect the change. But at the local level, at the company level, how would you and what would you advise local leaders at their companies to start coming to a point where they can start having a mindset of global policy and strategy for their company and for the nation?
So let me just be clear that when I say global policy, I don't mean just international.
Right.
I mean all people, I
Mhm.
mean all policies, and I mean all levels of government.
Right.
And so, with that, we have a tendency in our society for leaders to actually only focus on certain population groups, whether they be, large business owners or whether they be, certainly we have a history of racism in this country. So white Americans versus everyone else. And so, the whole notion is that in order to get to where we need to be as a society, where we are truly diverse, inclusive, and embracing of all people's potential, we actually need to be looking through the lens of all people and in all places. And so that means that we have a responsibility as leaders to be very broad in our thinking, to formulate strategies and policies that are not just broad, but also targeted to need. So, if you have certain maybe population groups or areas of the country that are struggling, or types of businesses like small businesses that are struggling, that you do your best to actually look at the unique challenges facing the kinds of population groups or businesses that are facing those challenges. And then you intentionally design strategies that are meant to help all of them succeed. And currently in this country, we are not doing that. Our systems and our policies are actually failing people and businesses, particularly small businesses, in the aftermath, not just of COVID-19, which has devastated certainly small businesses across the country in certain industries like the restaurant industry, certain communities like Black and Brown communities, but also in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, many of these businesses were already struggling and had not recovered yet from that crisis. And so now we're in COVID-19 and we're seeing the world be turned upside down. And the response, frankly, from Congress has been suboptimal. We've had a PPP program that seems to have only been really helpful to some of the mid to larger corporations. Small businesses, especially small businesses of color, were left behind and left out, frankly, because of the design of how that program was developed. But even, the remedy, quote unquote, the supposed remedy for that even had filters that, left people out that did not, left businesses out that did not have owners with great credit, which meant that, we've got businesses falling by the wayside left and right. Some estimates that I've heard, I haven't seen formal studies yet, that, approximately, half of Black businesses have closed. We know that restaurants have been hit hard. So what do we need to do? We need focused strategy. We need a broad thinking, and we need people who are leading with the discipline to understand that all of us matter, not just some of us.
Yeah, I love how you frame that, because it is an approach that I take when I'm speaking to CEOs, and I deal with smaller companies, and I always encourage them to ensure that when they actually create policy, that they include more than just themselves, because then they close themselves to that little group. And I love the global mindset. If there's anything that 2020 has allowed me to do and participate in, is on the global scale, across the world. And I love it, because not only was I exposed to the world through the Navy and my service there, but also through this podcast, this platform, to be able to understand and appreciate more than just me, my surroundings, and my nation. But you're so right when you talk about the different levels of people that can make policy that affect others. They need to be on a global mindset. So thank you for that. When I speak often also with leaders, I find that their policies come from their interest, right, versus the interest of the company and all that that actually comprise that company. And I could see that kind of translate up the ranks all the way up to, DC. Without us going too much into the political scheme, it is a habit that transcends just Washington. It actually goes all the way down to the local owners and leaders. How can I get away from creating policies that just appease, the group? Because that's really where the pitfalls are, right?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you asked that question, because what people tend to do is they tend to think of institutions as, separate from people, but people run institutions, whether the institution is government, local, state, or federal, or whether the institution is private sector business. And so their values, their priorities, their perspectives come into and to shape that institution into what it produces, whether that's policy, whether that's products and services. And so if you have people who are running, our government or our organizations and businesses in ways where they are blind to certain segments of society or certain issues in society, and it's relevant to the products and services and policies that they are putting out, then what we have are suboptimal outputs. Outputs that are on their face as soon as they're released are going to be not sufficient for the need. And oftentimes perverted in ways that basically undermine and create more problems than when they started. And so what we need is we need people who are educated, who are able to get out of their narrow mindset, who are, made aware of and are able to see their implicit biases, but have the tools and the techniques in order to step outside of those biases to understand the bigger picture. And so I think our society has failed our people in terms of producing leaders that are able to do that on a grand scale, the kind of scale that we need to get to the kind of society we all deserve. And frankly, I do think that we have another bite at the apple, but we're going to have to double down on education. And when I say education, I mean multicultural education, education that's broad-based, that really kind of appreciates all people in all places, and that, promotes this notion of unity.
Yeah, I love that. You as you was talking, the first thing that came up to my head was educated, right? And then you just mentioned that. So I'm glad that we're in sync in that regard, because it is truly the unlearned that make the biggest mistakes. They act without the educational background. Now, education alone, it'll get you so far. Then you have to actually have some historical data that you have put this into practice, and now right? You knew about it, but now you know. And I love that you bring that up, because I see a lot of times that leaders get to positions and they rest on their laurels. They get there and think that whatever they did prior to that and them getting there was good enough. And they stop learning, they stop digging, they stop exploring. And that's one of the most detrimental things that a leader can do in terms of their people. Because while their people are learning and increasing in their knowledge, the leaders are setting back. And before you know it, there's somebody that below you that can easily take your place. And so I love that you brought up education. Obviously, education has been a big part of your life and your career. And I'm glad that you set that tone for yourself and for us. So let's take a little sidetrack.
Sorry, yeah. Before you go there, can I just say this? You can be educated and still be unlearned. meaning that your education has not prepared you for the knowledge, that has not equipped you for the knowledge that you will need to meet a broad and diverse society. So you can have the highest education at the best university and still have these big gaps in knowledge
Mm-hmm.
That may make you unfit to lead. And
Right.
so, yeah, continuous education and exploration for all of us is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Um, I was going to say that. So we've talked about leadership. We talked about policy. I remember me specifically asking one leader of mine. I said, "Why was this written?" And it was a policy that came down concerning time and attendance, right? And I said, why are we writing policies around something that should be inherent to all employers? You get here on time. And it was one of those instances that I remember where the pen hit the paper without a need. All it needed was communication. And so a lot of times I see leaders creating policy just out of desperation. And actually, what it was lack of leadership. They tried to allow policy to dictate the leadership instead of the leader actually taking it by the horns and leading the people. For leaders that find themselves in that pickle, right? Because sometimes we hide behind policies. What would you tell a leader that would encourage them, outside of communication, to not be so quick to run to policy, but to start leading from where they are, their position?
So that's an interesting question because I do think that, your organization, whether it be a business or a government, needs a framework for how to
Right.
operate. And that framework needs to set the rules of the road, and it needs to be clear to everybody across time. So, policies usually help to do that. However, the question of values-based leadership, I think is, within the framework of the policies that have been established, is a very central question. It's one we're experiencing a crisis in as a nation right now, and certainly one that goes to every institution you can think of. And that is that, will leaders lead, with a strong kind of sense of mission, focused on, focusing and rallying and inspiring people to focus on goals and objectives that help the most people possible, and certainly help, the business or the country. And what we're finding is that people are so focused on their narrow well-being, whether or not they're going to get reelected, whether or not they're popular, whether or not people under them are listening to their authority or respecting their authority, whether or not, they're going to be challenged. They're so focused on the narrow that they often miss the big picture. So the inspiration is gone. The values, the reason why you exist in the first place, is pushed to the side. And what ends up happening is institutions have a crisis of legitimacy. Either they suffer major problems in their products and services, or they have catastrophic policies. And I certainly believe that that's something that's happening in the country right now, and certainly that there are institutions of all types that experience it at one time or another. Can it be corrected? Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that legitimacy. You said it, and a light bulb, in my head, because that's the true issue. The true issue is that you're trying to prove that you are the leader by setting these policies all haphazardly, and it's almost like a whip. You can't get into line. I'm gonna whip you into line by this policy, and I have often advised um, that it should be taken with a grain of salt and a step back. Think about what it is going to do. What's the purpose of this policy, and can you even sustain it? Because once it's written, then guess what? Somebody might check you on it later on. So you have to be careful how you step that forward. Let's talk. Let's sidetrack off the leadership. I love what you've said so far, but I want to present this book. We're better than this, and you've been championing the legacy and the book, and it is a great, great memoir for the fight, and it truly does represent the fight for the future of our democracy, and such a powerful way of presenting that for years to come. And so I want to just explore how that's going on your end. I know you have an event tonight with it, and also maybe some things that you're working on that you would like to share with us.
Yeah, so I'm excited. My late husband passed away in October of 2019. Right. And he had almost finished his book. And his book was meant to do two things. One was inspire young people to know that when they encounter obstacles, that they can press forward and overcome them and achieve everything that they were meant to be, as long as they focus on the goal and remain steadfast in terms of putting forward their effort and energy. His example, his life, being an African-American boy brought up in the Jim Crow South at a time when our nation turned its backs on people of color and African-Americans especially, being labeled special education as a child, growing up in a poor family in a segregated Baltimore. I mean, all of these were obstacles that he was able to overcome. And he rose to graduate from Howard University, Phi Beta Kappa. He rose to, become a lawyer and go on to Congress, serving and becoming one of the most powerful members of the US Congress. And so, he wanted his story to be a testament to youth. But he also wanted to warn the American people about our past president, our immediate past president, Donald Trump, and the threat that he represented to our democracy. And so that book is making the circuit. We've been traveling, quote unquote, virtually all around the country. We've got a series of libraries across the country lined up. We've had all kinds of book talks and sessions with people across the country, and that will continue. We've got 2 picture books coming out for children that are focused on Elijah's life. We've also got a young readers edition, a middle school version for kids that's coming out. And we're also working on a documentary that actually covers Elijah's life. But in addition to all that, I'm working on a book. And my book is Rageism. It's focused on why our society is failing to thrive, the issues and the challenges that we face as a country that actually create suboptimal results and that ends up undermining and marginalizing talent that could be used towards the productivity of this country. I argue that if we do the right thing by investing in the best strategies, by developing the best policies and making the right investments, that literally we can unleash the human potential that has been sidelined in this country. And we can unleash it in a way that will make us better in the future than we have been in the past. And so truly, I believe that our best years are ahead of us if only we can get this right.
Outstanding. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that book. So glad that you are heading down the road and writing that. I'm sure that it will impact us. And I'm also intrigued about the youth development off of the book that we just covered. We're better than this on the youth side, because I also have a heart for youth and would love to see that and implement it on my end. Maya, thank you so much for sharing this time with me this morning. If anyone were to want to get a hold of you, speak with you or anything like that, what would be the best way for them to do that?
You can DM me, which is direct message on Twitter. I'm at Maya R. Cummings. I'm on Instagram. You can direct message me on Instagram, Maya R. Cummings, and also on Facebook. And of course, LinkedIn, which is where we met, Enrique. So thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Yes. So I'm going to make sure that all of that is part of the video and or the show notes, and make sure that they can actually get to speak with you. Maya, it has been a pleasure, a blessing as well to speak with you this morning. And for those leaders that have been listening, you know, a global policy mindset, you know, and strategy is critical even at your level, wherever you are. If you are the leader and you don't have an inclusion type of mindset, something that involves more than just where you are, you're missing the mark. You're going to have some shortfalls. So the sooner you get there, the better it'll be for your people, the better it'll be for your company and those around you, and even our nation. So, once again, Maya, thank you for sharing your time with us. And for all those listening, as we close this show on a normal, success to you.